Halloween night had this weird electric buzz to it. The streets were alive, decked out in the usual spooky decorations, glowing pumpkins, fake cobwebs, skeletons, and ghosts swaying in the breeze. It was cold too, that kind of chill that seeps right into your bones. Kids and parents roamed the sidewalks, collected candy with laughter echoing off the houses, while the smell of wood smoke hung in the air. I could feel winter creeping in, even though Halloween was still clinging on. While others scrambled for candy, we craved something spookier. The eerie vibe of Halloween made the graveyard our perfect destination for adventure. It was notorious for the legends of spirits rising every other Halloween, especially after the disappearance of two kids, Brandon and Sarah, who vanished trying to prove the tales true. This year, we weren't just hunting for candy. We were chasing the thrill of the unknown. While the rest of the town buzzed with trick-or-treaters, we had our mindsets on something different, something much riskier. Jason, as always, led the way, calm and in control, his confidence oozing even through the simple skull face paint that barely hid his smirk. He didn't need much to stand out, just a hoodie and jeans, always looking like he was a step ahead of everyone else. Then there was Tyler, practically skipping beside him, his zombie face paint dripping with fake blood. He loved the thrill, never thinking twice before doing something stupid. And tonight wasn't any different. Lily, sticking close to me, had gone for a ghostly look, soft white face paint and gloves that somehow matched her cautious nature. She was scared, sure, but she always trusted the group to get her through. Me? I keep it simple. Just a black top with a spider web pattern, eyeliner, and a witch's hat. I've always been the one to use my head, but deep down, I couldn't deny the pull of the unknown, even if I didn't show it like the others. As we headed to the graveyard on the edge of town, that thrill of adventure mixed with dread started to settle in. We weren't dressed for Halloween. We were dressed for whatever came next. As we walked closer to the graveyard, the excitement buzzed in the air, and I couldn't help but glance over at my friends. Tyler was practically bouncing on his heels, his grin stretching from ear to ear. Can you believe we're actually doing this? This is going to be epic. Ghosts, ghouls, maybe even some zombies. He threw his arms out wide as if inviting the entire graveyard to join in on the fun. Yeah, or maybe we'll just find a few creepy old tombstones, Jason replied, a smirk playing on his lips. He always had a way of keeping things light, even when the atmosphere was thick with suspense. I'm not expecting much more than a few squirrels trying to scare us off. Lily, trailing a bit behind, tugged at the sleeve of her sweater. You guys are seriously excited about this? What if something happens? Like, what if we really see ghosts? Her eyes darted nervously around, but I could see the tiniest spark of curiosity behind her nervousness. Come on, it's just the graveyard, Jason reassured her, nudging her playfully. It's Halloween. The only thing we should be scared of is the amount of candy we're missing out on. Exactly, Tyler chimed in, undeterred. We're not here to get scared. We're here to make some legendary memories. His enthusiasm was infectious, and even Lily couldn't help but crack a smile, though I could tell she was still uneasy. I felt the thrill building inside me, knowing that no matter what we found, this was going to be a night to remember. As we stepped through the rusted gates of the graveyard, a chill crept up my spine, but the excitement of the night quickly overpowered any sense of fear. The fog clung to our ankles, and the moon barely broke through the dense canopy of trees. We wandered deeper, scanning the tombstones until we came across one that caught our attention. Its inscription almost faded away. Check this out, Tyler said, leaning closer. Here lies Thomas Grimsby, born in 1820. Can you imagine living back then? No cars, no smartphones, just a dude on a horse trying to hit on girls. Jason snorted. Right, he'd send a letter to some girl, and by the time it get to her, she'd be married with 3 kids. Then she'd write back, who dis? And ghost him. I grinned and added, or like, she sends you a letter telling you you're gonna be a dad. Tyler cut me off, cracking up. By the time you get it, the baby's already out. The group burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the graveyard. Just as we were catching our breath, Tyler jumped up onto the tombstone, throwing his arms wide. I'm the king of the graveyard. Rise, my fellow spirits. Let's hunt the neighborhood and freak out some parents. Our laughter filled the air, but as it faded, a cold chill swept through, reminding us we were still standing in a graveyard and the night was just getting started. Tyler was still grinning, caught up on his joke while we started to catch our breath. But something wasn't right. The air around us changed. It wasn't just the chill anymore. It was the silence, heavy and unnatural, like the world had pressed pause. I stopped laughing and looked up, and that's when I saw them. Figures, hundreds of them, barely visible in the fog. Silhouettes spread out, scattered, some close, some farther away, all watching us. They didn't move, just stood there like shadows that had broken free from the darkness. Tyler, I whispered, but he didn't hear me. He was still looking our way, oblivious to the nightmare that had crept up behind him. The ground beneath us rumbled softly at first, then harder. Cracks began to spiderweb out from the center of the graveyard, splitting the earth. I didn't have time to think. None of us did. Run! Jason yelled, taking off toward the entrance. We all bolted, adrenaline pushing us faster. But something was wrong. As we ran, the trees twisted and gnarled, their branches skeletal, black as shadows. The tombstones, once solid and weathered, now had chunks missing, some of them floating in midair. The thick fog clung to the ground, rising higher like a blanket of smoke, making it almost impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. But that wasn't the worst part. Around the edges of the graveyard, where there used to be streets, houses, and the faint glow of the town, there was now nothing. No horizon, no sky, just pitch black void swallowing everything. We weren't in our world anymore. The graveyard was a twisted version of itself, trapped in a nightmare, suspended in some kind of in-between dimension. Jason was ahead of us, sprinting for the rusted gates, and somehow he made it out. He slipped through just as a force field sealed behind him, cutting off the outside world in an instant. We slammed into the invisible wall, trapped. Tyler and I collapsed just short of the barrier, catching our breath. My lungs were burning, my heart racing in my chest. For a split second, I thought we were safe, that we could figure this all out. But then I realized something. Wait, where's Lily? I panted, glancing around. Tyler's face fell as we both turned back toward the graveyard. There she was, crouched near a tombstone, head down, shaking like a scared kid during a tornado drill. Her arms were tightly wrapped around her head, and she didn't move, completely frozen in fear. Lily, come on, Tyler shouted, but she didn't even flinch. It was like she couldn't hear us, too lost in her terror. We stood there trying to make sense of what to do, but that's when we saw it. The jack-o'-lantern-headed figure rising from the fog, black smoke trailing from his eyes. He was speed-walking toward Lily, the massive sword in his handless sleeves swinging casually at his side, like he was in a rush to kill, but completely determined to get the job done. Panic hit me hard. Lily, get up! I screamed, my voice cracking with fear. But she was still crouched there, trembling as the killer closed the distance. Tyler and I were frozen, helpless. He was almost on her now, the blade of his sword reflecting what little light there was as he raised it over her. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp noise echoed through the graveyard, a loud crash, like something had fallen. The killer stopped, his head snapping toward the sound. Slowly, the sword lowered, and without a word, he turned and stalked off in the direction of the noise, leaving us standing there in shock. We ducked behind a row of tilted tombstones, trying to catch our breath, hearts pounding in sync with the footsteps echoing through the fog. The eerie crunch of the leaves got closer, and my stomach dropped. Was he back? Tyler and I exchanged panicked glances, holding our breath, bracing for the worst. But then two familiar figures emerged from the mist. It was Brandon and Sarah, the two who'd gone missing earlier. Relief hit me like a wave, but it was short-lived as the footsteps behind them made my pulse quicken again. What the hell happened? I whispered, keeping low. We thought you were, dead. They looked shaken but determined. Brandon, still panting, pointing in the direction they came from. We found it, the way out. There's a hatch. It's the key to getting back to our dimension. Tyler blinked, still catching his breath. Wait, hatch? What do you mean hatch? Like, what are we talking about right now? This isn't a submarine movie. His voice cracked, half serious, half panicked. We heard your screams, Sarah said, ignoring his comments, and came back to help. We gotta hurry. If the killer gets to it before we do, he can close the hatch and summon it somewhere else in the graveyard. We'll be stuck here, maybe for good. That was all the motivation we needed. Without another word, they led us through the fog, backtracking toward the hatch they found. The graveyard felt more twisted the deeper we went. Shadows stretched longer, the floating tombstones seemed to move, and trees swayed unnaturally in the pitch black void surrounding us. It was like the entire place was alive, warping reality as we walked. Finally, we spotted it, a rusted metal door, half buried in the ground, almost hidden beneath layers of creeping vines and fog. For a split second, hope surged through me. This was it, the way out. But just as we took our first step toward the hatch, a shadow loomed from the mist. My blood ran cold. The jack-o'-lantern appeared, his carved pumpkin head glowing faintly in the fog, twisted and menacing. His hollow eyes locked on us, and the blade in his hand gleamed under the moonlight. Tyler grabbed my arm, panic flooding his voice. "He's between us and the hatch." My heart pounded harder. If he got to it before we did, we were screwed. He could summon it to another part of the graveyard, and then we'd be back to square one, lost in this nightmare for who knows how long. Lily was crouched again, shaken, paralyzed by fear. "Oh no, not now," I muttered under my breath, glancing over my shoulder. Tyler ran his hand through his hair, stressed. "Lily, please, not this again." She didn't respond, frozen in place. The killer took a slow, deliberate step toward us, boots crunching against the dead leaves. We didn't have time for this. "Lily, come on," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "We don't have time." Tyler grabbed her shoulder, shaking her gently. "Snap out of it. Lily, we're so close." Suddenly, Brandon, taller and braver than the rest of us, stepped forward. "I'll distract him. You guys get to the hatch." He didn't wait for our response. With a sudden burst of movement, he sprinted to the side, crushing through the underbrush and into the fog. The jack-o'-lantern snapped toward the noise and took the bait, veering after Brandon, blade raised. The moment his back was turned, Tyler and I grabbed Lily, practically dragging her as we made a break for the hatch. My pulse raced as I glanced back, terrified the killer might change his mind, or worse, beat us there. The fog seemed thicker now, the twisted shadows of tombstones distorting in the corner of my vision, every second stretched painfully, like the world was moving in slow motion. When we reached the hatch, I fumbled with the vines that covered it, pulling them back with trembling hands. The metal door creaked as we threw it open, revealing the dark void below. We tumbled in, one after another, disappearing into the pitch black abyss. Even after Lily was safely inside, Tyler and I hesitated for a moment, waiting for Brandon. The suspense gnawed at me, and every second felt like too long. What if Brandon couldn't outrun the jack-o'-lantern? Then, suddenly, the sound of frantic footsteps crashing through the fog broke the quiet. Brandon burst from the mist, wild-eyed and out of breath. "Go, go, go!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. We didn't need to be told twice. We dove into the hatch after him, one by one. As I went through the hatch, it wasn't like falling into some abyss. It was more like stepping through a solid wall. The second I crossed the threshold, my body phased through, the world warping around me like I seen in superhero movies. One moment I was in the graveyard, the next I felt like I was being pulled through an invisible barrier. The air shimmered, thick and resistant for just a moment, before everything snapped back into place. We hit the ground hard, tumbling out onto the solid earth. I coughed, spitting out dirt, and looked up, dazed. The nightmare was over. All of us lay sprawled out on the ground, breathless and disoriented, but alive. But as we stared at each other in the eerie silence, a new weight settled over us. Brandon and Sarah exchanged glances, the same thoughts clearly running through their minds. What were we supposed to say? Who would believe us? Believe any of this? We didn't even know how we'd explain it, let alone convince anyone. So we made a pact right then and there. When people asked, we'd tell them the same thing. We ran away. That was it. No one would ever know the truth.